The observations that follow are not modern impressions. They are drawn from the Dictionary of National Biography, a Victorian work of record first published in the late 19th century, edited in London in the year 1888 under the direction of Leslie Stephen. This volume gathered the lives of notable figures from across the centuries of British history. Its purpose was not to persuade, but to preserve, to record, in measured language, how men and women were described by their contemporaries and remembered by their age. What follows is not interpretation, it is extraction. The language is theirs, the observations are theirs, the record remains. It is recorded of one man that in his youth his complexion was so exceeding beautiful and fine, that people would follow him in the street merely to admire him. Those who knew him observed that, within a fair body, there resided an harmonical mind, inclined toward order, symmetry, and the measured beauty of gardens and architecture. This was Sir John Danvers. Yet time altered not only the countenance of the body, but the weight of reputation. Admiration gave way to suspicion, and his name passed into record under a cloud not easily dispersed. It is recorded of another that he was tall, stout, and hale, his complexion swarthy, black, his hair strong, curled, and of the same dark hue. His voice was loud, yet his reputation gentle, for he was both beloved and respected by those who knew him. This was Charles Daubus. One cannot overlook a man whose skin was described as of an excessive darkness, so remarkable that his patron bestowed upon him the title Gentleman Usher of the Black Rod. Those who observed his manner found him benevolent, marked by the stately bearing of an earlier age. This was Solomon de Rose. There was also a scholar of singular height, standing far above the stature of common men. His hair was nearly black, and it is written that his skin was almost of the same color. His bodily aspect was described as altogether kingly, yet his life was framed for war and contention, and he was seldom known to pass a day without strife. This was Thomas Dempster. Contrast these with a man of very fair and sanguine complexion, bearing a long beard as white as milk. Tall and slender, often seen in a gown with hanging sleeves, he was dreaded by the children of his neighborhood. Being widely accounted a conjurer, this was John Dee. It is recorded also of a middle-sized and spare man, brown of complexion, his hair dark brown, his features sharp, and a notable mole near his mouth. He was perceived by others as a master of the lesser art, that of forging a story and imposing it upon the world for truth. This was Daniel Defoe. One more is noted as fresh-colored, with waving locks of light brown hair and eyes of blue, a milder aspect preserved in record with deliberate care. This was George Daniel. Even among the celebrated natural philosophers, description was not omitted. It is written of one that his face was ruddy, set beneath deep overhanging brows and bushy eyebrows. This was Charles Robert Darwin, and it is recorded likewise of a woman rather tall in stature, with dark hair and strongly formed expressive features, a description preserved without embellishment. This was Maria Rebecca Davison. These descriptions were not written in haste. They were chosen, preserved, printed. Whether these varying shades of the countenance were held to reflect the internal humors of these lives, or merely the observing eye of their age, remains an observation unresolved. Before continuing, we need to look directly at the source. This work was published in 1888, not as commentary, but as record. Its purpose was preservation, not reinterpretation. Earlier biographical writing described what was seen. Complexion, hair, and features were recorded as visible facts, not categories, not abstractions. These are not isolated phrases. They appear across multiple entries, written by different hands, preserved in a single volume. Victorian editors did not remove these descriptions. They preserved them alongside reputation and deed. Over time, description gives way to shorthand. Precision yields to convenience. Primary sources do not argue. They wait. They can be checked. The language remains as written. The record endures. What it means is left to the reader. If complexion was recorded in formal biographies, it was also recorded in everyday public life. Newspapers are not opinion pieces here. They are functional documents, ads, notices, descriptions meant to identify people accurately. The language we've just seen was not confined to biographies. The same descriptive terms appear elsewhere, in public notices, advertisements, and newspapers, written not to persuade, but to identify. Went away last night from Thomas Snowden's plantation. The 6 following servant men, viz. William Lowe, an Englishman, about 20 years of age, about 5 feet 8 or 9 inches high, by trade a blacksmith, of a swarthy complexion, and has lost one of his foreteeth, had on an Osnabrück shirt, dirty brown Holland trousers, old castor hat, old shoes, and plated buckles. Richard Ellingsworth, born in Yorkshire, about 25 years of age, 5 feet 8 or 9 inches high, of a dark complexion and pretty well set, had on an Osnabrück shirt, crocus trousers, old flowered lapelled waistcoat, old felt hat, and good shoes. Richard Thompson, born in the north of England, about 27 years of age, about 5 feet 5 or 6 inches high, of a swarthy complexion, and is much pitted with the smallpox, had on an Osnabrück shirt, crocus trousers, old felt hat, and good shoes with copper buckles. Thomas Hogg, born in Yorkshire, about 25 years of age, about 5 feet 6 or 7 inches high, and of a swarthy complexion, had on an Osnabrück shirt, black breeches and stockings, and half-worn castor hat, and old shoes with copper buckles. Thomas Sutton, a North Countryman, about 25 years of age, about 5 feet 8 or 9 inches high, and of a fair complexion, had on an Osnabrück shirt, canvas trousers, old castor hat, and good shoes with plated buckles. John Driver, an Englishman, born in Norfolk, about 23 years of age, about 5 feet 5 or 6 inches high, and of a dark complexion, had on an Osnabrück shirt, crocus trousers, old castor hat, old shoes, and copper buckles. Whoever takes up the said servants shall receive, on securing them in any jail, so that their masters get them again, if taken 20 miles from home, 30 shillings for each, and so in proportion for a greater distance, and, if brought home, reasonable traveling charges paid by Henry and Thomas Snowden. The source of the ad is Annapolis, Maryland Gazette, 5th of August, 1773, Annapolis, Maryland. The full issue is available in Colonial newspaper archives and can be independently verified. Anti-Edom Forge, Frederick County, April 27th. Ran away from the above forge on the 20th instant, a servant man named Thomas McLean, or Onan, an Irishman, though he says he is a Highland man, a low squat fellow, of a very swarthy complexion, with short black hair. He had on when he went away a blue cloth coat, a double-breasted jacket of an ash-colored bearskin cloth, trimmed with white hat metal buttons, a pair of buckskin breeches, old shoes, and a pair of gray mixed or worsted stockings. He commonly wears his garters under his knee, is an artful talkative fellow, and pretends to be a conjurer, and brags much of his land and Negroes in Cassell or Kent County. Whoever brings or secures the said fellow, so as I may have him again, shall receive 3 pounds Pennsylvania currency from Samuel Bill, Jr., for self, 15 pounds reward. May 20th, 1773. Ran away from the subscriber's plantation in Frederick County on the head of Bennett's Creek on the 17th instant. At night, a convict servant man named William Flint, about 22 years of age, born in the west of England, a spare thin fellow, about 5 feet 8 inches high, of a swarthy complexion, short black hair, and has lost one of his foreteeth. He had on and took with him a white cotton jacket, brown cloth ditto much worn, a pair of leather breeches black and dirty, 2 white shirts, 2 pair of stockings and shoes, and a new felt hat. It's possible he may have changed his name and apparel, as he has a sum of money with him. Whoever takes up the said servant and brings him either to John Plummer, overseer on the above said plantation, or to the subscriber living in Anne Arundel County near Elk Ridge Church, shall have the above reward for their trouble, besides what the law allows, paid by Henry Ridgely. Fredericksburg, November 30th, 1773. Ran away from the subscribers on the 22nd instant, 2 servant men, the one a barber, an Englishman named John Cockle, with short brown curled hair, 5 feet 7 inches high, had on a colored coat and jacket, blue cloth breeches, and a small fashionable hat, speaks thick and stoops a little in the shoulders. The other, a tailor, calls himself an Englishman, but has the Irish accent, named John Driver, with short bushy hair, 5 feet 5 or 6 inches high, had on a blue coat red striped gingham jacket, and Whiston breeches. Whoever takes up said servants and delivers them to us in Fredericksburg shall have 5 pounds reward, or in proportion for either of them. John Atkinson, James Newton, Dorchester County, December 6, 1773. The subscriber having a Negro man committed to his custody as a runaway while he was sheriff, about 5 feet 8 inches high, who calls himself James Green and says he came from Antigua, and the said Negro, being still in his possession, desires his master to take him away. Daniel Sullivan. This is notable because in the previous video, we examined Jacobite transportation lists showing black Scots deported to Antigua during the same period. Bladensburg, June 27, 1753. Ran away last night, the 3 following servants, viz. William Bill, by trade a gardener, about 30 years of age, is a short, thick, well-set fellow, with a full, broad face, of a pale, swarthy complexion, with brown hair and light hazel eyes. He has a scar or dent on his right jaw and a sore on his right leg. He was born at Whitehaven in the north of England, speaks very slow, and is a very palavering fellow. Thomas Starkey, an Englishman, about 30 or 35 years of age, is a tall, well-made, likely fellow, has a thin face, and is of a swarthy complexion, with pretty long black curled hair, and smokes a great deal of tobacco. What's striking is not that these descriptions exist, it's that they are so consistent and yet so unfamiliar to most of us. In school, we are rarely told that European servants on plantations were routinely described as swarthy or dark in complexion, alongside detailed notes of height, scars, speech, and origin. The newspapers were not making a statement, they were trying to identify people accurately. That alone raises a quiet question about what parts of the historical record have been emphasized and what parts have simply faded from view. The question then is not whether these descriptions exist. They do. The deeper question is how so many people, Irish, Highlanders, and others, came to be on plantations in the first place. To answer that, we have to step back to the mid-17th century and to the policies that reshaped Ireland and Britain under Oliver Cromwell. It is recorded that the wars of Oliver Cromwell were not waged for land alone. They were wars of conscience, as the age understood conscience, and of religion, as religion was then enforced. England in the mid-17th century was divided not merely by crown and parliament, but by creed. Cromwell and those who followed him were of the stricter Protestant persuasion, men who believed that error in religion invited disorder in the state. Ireland, by contrast, remained overwhelmingly Catholic, and was therefore regarded not only as rebellious, but as dangerous. To Cromwell's government, Catholicism was not simply a faith, it was a political liability. Thus the conquest of Ireland was framed as correction, as purification, and as prevention. Those who resisted were punished, those who submitted were removed. The land was surveyed, measured, and reassigned, not only to reward loyalty, but to alter the religious character of the country itself. The native population was pushed westward, or sent outward, to the Caribbean, to the American colonies, and to distant plantations. This was not done in secret. It was justified openly, as necessity, as security, as divine sanction. What followed in the records was not explanation, but aftermath. Newspapers did not recount the theology. They did not revisit the wars. They assumed the reader knew why so many Irish, Highlanders, and others were suddenly present far from their places of birth. They recorded only what could be seen: speech, accent, labor, and complexion. Thus religion becomes the unseen hand, present in policy, absent in advertisement, and only when the causes and the consequences are read together does the full movement of people begin to take shape. In historical inquiry, the question is not what we wish the past to say, but what the records are willing to show. In 1932, the Jesuit scholar Joseph J. Williams set out to examine a quiet inconsistency in the records of Jamaica, one that had been noticed for generations, yet rarely explained with documentation. Visitors to Jamaica in the British West Indies, Williams writes, frequently remark a seeming anomaly. Even in the remotest sections of the island, and among people long classified simply as Negroes, distinctly Irish surnames appear, names so common that their presence cannot be dismissed as coincidence. These names are found not only in towns, but in rural districts among populations whose ancestry is otherwise assumed to trace back to the earliest arrivals. Williams does not treat this as folklore, he treats it as a problem requiring explanation. The explanation most often given, Williams notes, is that enslaved people simply adopted the surnames of their masters, but rather than repeat this assumption, he tests it against the records. In the case of the surname Burke, one of the most frequently encountered, Williams finds no planter of that name owning land in Jamaica at all. The same absence, he observes, appears again and again with other Irish surnames. If these names did not come from masters, then their presence demands another explanation. Williams states his approach plainly. The answer, he writes, lends itself to a threefold division, from Ireland through Barbados to Jamaica. To understand Jamaica, Williams turns first to Ireland. In the mid-17th century, Jamaica was a new possession of the English Commonwealth, one whose survival depended upon population. Williams cites a memorandum attributed to Oliver Cromwell, in which the question is raised whether the West Indies could be sustained without a constant supply of people, and whether such a supply might be obtained by transporting those deemed burdensome or condemned within the Commonwealth. The correspondence that follows leaves little room for ambiguity. Writing from Ireland, Henry Cromwell reports that young women are to be taken up, although he states, "We must use force in taking them." Boys as young as 12 or 14 are likewise proposed for removal, their transport justified as advantageous to both colony and Commonwealth. Ireland, however, was not the final destination. Williams identifies Barbados as a crucial, often overlooked stage in this movement. Correspondence between Cromwell and the governor of Barbados reveals concern that Irish servants were dispersing once their terms expired. Orders were issued to retain these populations and to encourage their redirection toward Jamaica, which had now become the Commonwealth's priority. By the time these populations reached Jamaica, the records themselves began to change. In the Jamaican records, Williams observes a subtle but significant shift. Irish surnames continue to appear, but references to origin gradually disappear. Individuals are recorded not by where they came from, but by their condition, as servants, laborers, or Negroes. The names remain, the context does not. Williams is careful with categories. The society of the island, he writes, was divided into three classes: masters, servants, and slaves, each defined by law rather than assumption. Servitude could be temporary or prolonged, slavery permanent. These distinctions, Williams notes, governed how people were recorded, regulated, and remembered. Williams does not argue legend. He traces policy. He follows correspondence, orders, and records as they move people across the Atlantic and into categories that no longer preserved origin. When read in sequence, the documents reveal a path from Ireland through Barbados to Jamaica, not by accident, but by administration. The book From Whence the Irish lays out this process plainly, that Irish presence in the colonies did not begin as voluntary migration, but followed conquest, confiscation, and enforced transportation. The Caribbean emerges as a critical link: Barbados, Antigua, Montserrat, destinations repeatedly named in transportation records and later echoed casually in colonial newspapers. Thus, when a notice records a servant who says he came from Antigua, it does so without surprise. The movement had already occurred. In the 17th century, servitude followed allegiance and religion more than it followed color. The records reflect this reality. People were described by what could be observed: accent, labor, build, and complexion, before later systems simplified identity into narrower categories. The newspapers do not explain this system because they were not written to teach history. They were written to identify people. They record the effect, not the cause. Only when the policies of removal and the notices of identification are read together does the full movement of people begin to come into view. What the record reveals is not argument, but alignment. And it is in that alignment between war, religion, transportation, and description that the past becomes visible without being instructed what to say. What we've looked at here are not arguments, and they are not reinterpretations. They are records, written for practical purposes by people who assumed their world was already understood. Newspapers describe what could be seen. Policies explain why those people were there. Transportation lists show how populations were moved. Individually, each source appears ordinary. Read together, they form a pattern. History is not altered by adding opinion to it. It becomes clearer when sources are placed side by side and allowed to speak in their own language. Much of what feels unfamiliar today is not because it was hidden, but because it was never revisited. The record remains, and when it is read carefully, it continues to ask questions of us without needing to answer them itself. If you haven't seen the earlier videos in this series, I recommend watching them next. They're directly connected to what we've covered here, and together they show how these records fit into a wider historical pattern. If this video was helpful to your own research, consider subscribing. This channel follows the record where it leads, using primary sources and careful reading.